Today, on Trans Day of Visibility, we celebrate the trans individuals in our communities and recognize their struggles for recognition and increasingly survival in the face of unfathomable hate which leads them to often feel unsafe or like they don't belong.
And we also celebrate the many contributions that they've made. We've had trans leaders at the forefront of progress in every field imaginable, from STEM to the arts to human rights advocacy to so much more.
All across the country, we're seeing a rise in legal, political, and physical attacks on those in the trans community.
And it's just appalling and unconscionable, this discrimination, and it's gone on for far too long.
1 year later.
So like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate
but like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that.
And you know what's proving that point? When you look at like Gavin Newsom on his podcast with Charlie Kirk, right?
He wants it so bad, bro. That motherfucker's thirsty.
Exactly. But you see how quick he is to distance himself from trans athletes and stuff like that. So now it's like, oh, so you never cared.
No, they never cared.
You never gave a fuck. It was just all about politics for you.
Yes.
It's all about that for all politicians, though, right?
Absolutely. But some people show it better than others. Some people act like they care better than others.
Yeah, you need to learn how to lie better.
And I don't think Democrats are going to win so easily in 2028. I think that because the Democrats are in such disarray, America will say, you know what, just give me a sensible Republican. Just give me a traditional conservative.
Yeah.
Like, give me a Nikki Haley, just somebody, just a regular conservative. I can deal with that.
Boy. So we got to follow up on the story that we talked about yesterday out of California involving the transgender high school athlete by the name of A.B. Hernandez, who has been dominating women's sports in the triple jump, long jump, and other track and field events, okay? And that has created a lot of controversy because parents are really upset with the fact that this transgender athlete is dominating women's sports and is competing in the state championships. Now, the Trump administration has launched an investigation into California. They are threatening to withhold funds over Title IX violations, okay, allowing biological boys to compete against biological girls in sports. Now, California's response to this has been to implement a temporary policy change that would essentially allow biological girls to compete in the track and field championships if they were displaced by a transgender athlete, right? So in the case of the events that A.B. Hernandez participates in, the female athletes who did not qualify for the state championships because they lost their spot, okay, to the transgender athlete, they were given an invite to the track meet. Now, Gavin Newsom has come out in support of this policy, basically saying that this is a reasonable compromise, even though the reality is it's not a reasonable compromise because you still have unfairness when it comes to athletic play, right? I mean, you still have a transgender athlete competing against biological girls, and that in and of itself is unfair. However, the trans community, the LGBTQ community, woke activists are upset with Gavin Newsom for what they see as capitulation to the Trump administration by implementing this new rule by saying that, well, this creates two sets of rules, two sets of qualification rules for biological girls and transgender athletes. They're essentially saying that it's not fair for these biological girls to still be able to qualify even though they were beat by a transgender athlete, and the transgender athlete would not have the same ability to qualify, aka they would not get a second chance to qualify for state championships, unlike biological girls, right? This is what they're saying. So again, this is why Gavin Newsom is getting a whole lot of backlash from the woke activists who feel like that he's throwing transgender kids, athletes, children under the bus, right? According to them, right? This is what they're saying. And it's not just this. There are also other issues as well, too, in California that Gavin Newsom is trying to pivot on because he's trying to run towards the middle to run for president of the United States. Everybody can see the move coming.
Welcome back. California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom is catching quite a bit of attention by proposing to scale back free health care in California for undocumented immigrants. Under his new proposal, undocumented immigrants age 19 and older would no longer be able to apply for the state's Medi-Cal insurance program. This would start next year if approved. The move follows a Trump administration announcement that it will investigate California for providing cash assistance to some undocumented immigrants. I want to bring in our political correspondent, Nydia Cavazos, who joins me from Los Angeles. Fill in the blanks, Nydia, and walk us through the reaction.
Major Governor Gavin Newsom announced earlier this morning that California is currently facing a deficit of over $12 billion. And in order to ease some of these economic concerns and make up for the state revenue, he's proposing scaling back on a state program that allows undocumented immigrants to receive free health care. And this would apply to anyone living in the country illegally over 19 years or older. And this would also start as of January 2026. And what this means is that anyone who is already enrolled wouldn't necessarily be kicked out, but they would have to pay a monthly premium of $100. And what this also means is that any new enrollees would be banned from subscribing or entering this health program as of 2026.
And the woke activists, the far left extremists, they are pissed at Gavin Newsom, and they're basically telling him that you're not going to win, right? We're going to make sure that you don't win because you are stabbing us in the back. Take a look.
Dear Gavin Newsom, there is only one thing more fucking enraging than you throwing our community under the bus by torturing children, literally tormenting and destroying the mental health of transgender children and all children, because tormenting and traumatizing children by publicly outing them and making them compete in sports in their own category that's separate from everyone else isn't great for any youth. That is traumatizing. Young people are not going to feel safe in that environment, and that is well documented by research, which we can go into another time. But the thing that is more enraging, even than that, is how bad your political calculation is. That this is somehow an effective way to moderate your positions, or that you're going to appeal to more people. This is such a misreading, and it drives me crazy. And you would think that someone who's been around and in politics as long as you would be able to understand that what people want right now across the political spectrum is someone who's gonna fight and be impactful and get things done. People want change, and they want someone who's meeting the moment and understanding how bad things are. Now, people don't agree about what's bad, right? You have MAGA people who think what's bad is snowflakes and liberals, and you have people on the left who think what's bad is something else. Fine. But everybody wants drastic change, and someone who's going to fight for that. Nobody wants a sad, pathetic, pandering bitch ass who has no compass and is happy to go back to separate but equal if he thinks that that's going to get him votes.
I didn't even get taken out to dinner first. In a not so surprising turn of events, given his recent podcast guests, Gavin Newsom has decided to cut $17 million from queer healthcare, specifically gender-affirming care. And it's going to be on Pride Month, ending on June 30th of this year. This bill also stops any applications for undocumented immigrants to get on the state-funded healthcare plan. Gavin, what the fuck, man? Why are you a wolf in sheep's clothing? So you're gonna f with the LGBTQ plus community and the undocumented immigrants in California, of all places? Now, I don't know about the rest of the California gays and theys. However, we've pretty much built this fucking state. We've been lauding this place as a place that's a safe space for everyone to come and avoid the nonsense in this country. And on top of that, this state literally depends on undocumented immigrants, and you want to take away their health care? Well, this is a call out to every Californian. We are going to dump Gavin Newsom like the bad mother piece of shit that he is. He ain't going to get a chance to get to the presidential race because we're done with him. This is 100% a clear betrayal to all queer and trans Californians. So if you're here and you're queer or trans, now's the time to make your voice heard, because this is the last bastion of safe space for all queer and trans people. We're not going to let some stupid white guy with a shitty haircut ruin it for everybody just because he wants to be president one day. So directly to Gavin Newsom, you're not going to be president, and we are all going to make sure of it.
Yeah, so I got to tell you guys, I personally think that Gavin Newsom is cooked. And Gavin Newsom and the backlash that he is getting from the far left over what they see as capitulation to Trump on 80-20 issues, right? Issues where it's like, come on. Like, if you are not on the right side of this issue, you are just not living in reality. Yeah, I think that because the far left is so extreme that they will go out of their way to make sure that Gavin Newsom doesn't win the Democrat primary, right? Which, in my opinion, I think would be a disaster for his career. Okay, I mean, the guy clearly is a political animal who wants to be president of the United States, and he will do anything in order to try to become president of the United States. And a lot of people are seeing that, and they don't like that, right? They don't like the clear political calculation that he's making here. And I really do believe that it's going to be very hard for him to win a Democrat primary at this point, even though he's pretending to be a moderate, right? So without further ado, I want to react to this CNN panel in which you're going to have another Democrat that is going to express dissatisfaction with Gavin Newsom for what they see, again, as capitulation to Trump on this issue of trans athletes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Gavin Newsom is searching for an identity that he thinks will be sellable to run for president of the United States. And you know what? That's disgusting. If you want to have a position that I disagree with, let's have a conversation. But to shop out your position, to put you in what you believe is a better position, no one is going to buy that. They're going to see it as raw politics, and I have no respect for that at all. It's like, it's Tuesday. What Gavin Newsom are we going to get?
You know, low key, again, they really do have a point, right? Even though I disagree with these lunatics, they have a point, right? When it comes to the fact that Gavin Newsom was a progressive, right? He was responsible for a lot of these woke laws in California that has led to the current state of California. And now that he's kind of pushing back against it, now that he's going back against it because he sees the writing on the wall, right? He sees that, hey, this is not popular. I can't appeal to the other 49 states being this far left. It is kind of disgusting, to be honest with you, right? It really does show you that he is a politician's politician, okay? That he doesn't have any real core beliefs outside of whatever he thinks will help him gain more power, okay? And when people see that, yeah, it's a turnoff. But at this point, this is not just a Gavin Newsom thing. This is a Democrat Party thing. Like, for example, when it comes to studying men, right? Democrats are saying, hey, we need to study men like science experiments, right? Like men are animals to be studied, right? Because they don't want to vote for us. So we need to study them and change the way we talk to them, right? Try to essentially put a lipstick on a pig in order to get men to vote for Democrats. However, the problem with that is that that just seems fake, right? It's fake. It's not authentic. It's a political calculation. And people don't like that. People don't like politicians that are clearly making political calculations when it comes to their stated beliefs, right? I mean, that's part of the reason why President Trump is so popular is because he's not overly politically calculated, right? And I'm not saying that, you know, politicians should make some political calculations. That has to happen sometimes, but you can't go from super far left, okay, to now all of a sudden you're a moderate. And this is why I try to tell you guys that Democrats, this whole like, oh, let's just talk to people different thing without actually changing our policies is not going to work. The whole party has to be rebuilt from the ground up, right? They have to essentially abandon the far left base and say, hey, we're not trying to appeal to you guys anymore. This is not who we are, right? We're going to try to appeal to actual reasonable and sensible people in this country. Until they do that, they have no hope, right? They can't thread the needle on this. And I've been saying this since the day after the election. They will not be able to thread the needle of getting common sense people in this country on board with a party that tries to appeal to far left extremists. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
And I don't disagree with what you just said, but isn't that kind of par for the course in the world of politics?
I hope
not.
not.
Don't their views evolve? I mean, I believe when President Obama ran for president of the United States, he was against gay marriage. And during his term of the presidency, it evolved and he was for it.
Gavin Newsom has historically been one of the most significant allies of the LGBT community there had been. To do this kind of a shift isn't an evolution. There's a difference between an evolution, which I support. You can say that about a lot of people. Chuck Schumer, Hillary Clinton. This isn't that. This is a 180-degree flip, clearly for political reasons.
I don't want to steal Scott's thunder here, but one of the reasons that Gavin Newsom may have switched is because of the polling on this issue. 25% of Americans agree that trans women should be allowed to participate in female sports, but 75% disagree. The politics, the public opinion on this is in a completely different place.
I agree.
And one more thing, and I'll let you get in, but the accommodation that they announced in California seems to acknowledge a sense of unfairness in the process.
It's deeply unfair, and for all these parents that have little girls who work very hard in all these sports, whether it's track and field or the softball situation that's going on in Minnesota right now, where they've got a team that's dominating the rest of the teams because they have a trans pitcher on the team. If you're a parent of one of these little girls who worked their whole life to get to something like this, only to be aced out at the end by a completely unfair competition, it must be deeply frustrating. And politicians have a responsibility, A, to listen to their people, but B, to take real stands. And the true best real stand here, and it also happens to be very popular, is just to say it's fundamentally unfair, and it's deeply unfair to women. It's unfair to girls. It's unfair to women in these sporting events who are being knocked off of podiums. Have been happening for years. Trump took a strong stand on it, and a lot of people rallied around him, and it's because the American people agree.
I just want to say this, and you know, my background is in sports. I'll start with that. I don't want to scare the people, as you said earlier. I don't want people to think that this is truly an epidemic, that young boys are competing in young women's sports and young girls' sports. These cases are few and far in between. They don't happen that often. I agree that we need to understand what is happening and we need to get ahead of it. And oddly enough, I agree with you. Scott, oddly enough, I agree with you, which is
why is it odd?
Because I don't normally agree with you.
Hold on. Let's let her finish.
The science behind this hasn't been studied enough or talked about enough for us to make a real full opinion. I do agree. Girls' sports are for girls.
Wait.
I do. Hold on.
She's listening.
Okay.
Just give her a second to finish.
You stop, friend.
Just give her a second to finish.
And my whole point is this. I don't want us to act like there are a ton of trans athletes trying to compete in little girl sports, women's sports, girls' sports, whatever the case may be. That is not the case. And we know that. It's minuscule. And what's going to happen?
But I did hear you say you believe that girls' sports
I
should be
for girls.
Biological.
Biologically, I think there's an unfair advantage. They talk about the fairness issue. We go back and forth with, Gavin Newsom. Who is he today? I agree. Perhaps he did evolve and he did change his mind. But public opinion, if you ask people in the quiet corners how they feel about it, they don't either want to discuss it or they understand that it is unfair. There is an unfair competitive edge, and that needs to be addressed.
Ding, 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 ding. Right, and this is why I don't think the polls are accurate, right? I don't think this is an 80-20 issue. I actually think this is like a 90-10 issue, or really a 99-1 issue. Let's keep it 100. Let's be real. Because, again, if you ask most people, right, if you said, look, nobody will ever know what you said, okay, there's no possibility of anybody ever knowing what your real opinion is on this, they're going to say, yeah, this is unfair, right? Everybody knows it's unfair. Okay, even the wokes, they know it's unfair. But again, they don't want to hurt feelings of a small group of people, in which they continue to use this argument that, well, it's such a small issue, who cares, right? And it's like, well, the girls who are losing in their sports, right, unfairly having to compete in sports. Again, some of these sports are contact sports, by the way, right? So again, you talk about girls, seriously getting hurt. It matters to them, 100%. It shouldn't happen at all, right? Any girl that unfairly loses a competition, loses a spot in a championship race, gets hurt, yeah, that is a travesty, right? And that is not something that we should be okay with just because, well, it doesn't happen that often, okay? In which, let's be real, we're seeing more and more and more of this, right? So it may not be super prevalent now, but it's prevalent enough where it is happening at the highest levels in sports, okay? Like, for example, in college, and is also happening in high school and other places as well, too. It's happening enough that it's a problem. It's an issue. It's an issue that should be addressed. And when you have more, people becoming trans, more kids becoming trans and stuff like that, yeah, you're going to see a lot more of it, right? You're going to see a whole lot more of it. So it's better to nip it in the bud now rather than to wait until it gets completely out of control. But see, the Democrats, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because, again, they all know that this is unfair, but they have to appeal to the far left base, especially to win primaries, right? When you talk about a primary election, you have to appeal to the most radical of your party, right? That's just kind of how it works, okay? It did in the general election. You got to pivot because you have more moderate voters in general elections. The problem that Democrats are going to face is that because their base is so radical, they're going to basically be nominating and electing lunatics in the primaries, and they're not going to be able to compete in general elections, right? That is the issue that they're going to face, okay? And again, the reason why is because the far left base of the Democrat Party is completely intolerant to any type of moderation on these types of issues, right? On the LGBTQ issue, they don't want any moderation whatsoever. Any type of moderation to them is capitulation, and that is unacceptable.
For the trans kids, and what do? Isn't this a good compromise where they're saying that you can participate?
I don't know.
You can't tell those kids, well, now you
Arthur,
just
we're
can't
not going to solve that in 3 minutes. What I'm saying is everybody can't just come to. We don't know what a good compromise is.
One other
we don't
thing,
have enough
just to
information
Arthur's,
for
just
that.
We do know what a good compromise is. We do have enough information. The left, they just don't want to accept the compromise. They don't want to accept the fact that, hey, scientifically, this is settled, right? We don't need any more studies. We don't need to study anything anymore. This is settled. What we need is for biological boys to compete against biological boys in sports and biological girls to compete against biological girls in sports. And if you have trans athletes, if they want to compete, they can compete amongst themselves, right? Or with their biological sex. It's really that simple, but they don't want to accept that, right? They don't want to accept it.
Arthur's point, it bears repeating that we're talking about kids here.
Yes.
Okay, this
correct.
AB Hernandez is a minor,
a child,
and she's been adults.
Yeah, she has been the subject not just of intense scrutiny in her community, but the president of the United States is threatening one child.
All of that is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Saying that, oh, well, this is a child, that's irrelevant. That's not relevant to the subject about fairness, right? It's not relevant. You trying to now sell us a sad sob story about how, oh, man, this is a child. Okay, well, what about all of the girls who are also children who are not able to compete fairly, right? What about them? Do their feelings not matter? Apparently, according to these people, the feelings of trans kids matters a lot more than the feelings of other children, right? That's essentially what they're putting out here.
One child who is 16
in the state
years
of California,
old, and it's not fair. You forget
threatening the school district over this one child.
And I don't think that people are intelligent enough to realize the humanity of a 16-year-old child being bullied and talked about and protested. Understand, you may not like the policy, but where's the humanity of it all?
I'm in her favor. I think she should be able to participate, but she shouldn't be able to knock someone off the podium. And California, I'm sorry, I'll give you. They should be complimented. They're trying to find a compromise, letting the child participate, but not take the child that Scott referred to, who's been training all her life, to get thrown off the podium because someone who's biologically different and has an advantage won. So they're trying to figure it out.
You know, there are, by reports from California, thousands of student athletes in California. That makes sense. There are documented single-digit number of trans athletes. And this one particular athlete, at the meet right before this one, was screamed at by adults in the stands, booed, jeered, whatever you think.
Threatened, all the things.
We have to remember these are children and that adults should be setting the tone. You want to debate this? Debate this, but don't yell at this person.
Exactly.
I think adults should set the tone, and they should not put these kids in this situation. Unfortunately, you said this hasn't been studied enough to know that, look, we've got millions of years of study. Men and women are different, and that's why it's unfair to put boys in girls' sports. We don't need to have any more biological studies. It is fundamentally unfair.
But do you see, genuinely curious, any accommodations that are reasonable? You have a 16-year-old who wants to participate in sports. In your mind, is there any way that can happen that is fair?
Of course.
How?
Have the people participate with their own biological sex. Boys in boys sports, girls in girls sports. It's worked for a very long time in this country.
But it's not that simple anymore, Scott. That's where we are. So what do you do when it's not
80% of the country?
But it's not that anymore. So what do you do with the 20%? Do we ignore them?
Yeah, that is what we do. Yes, we ignore them because their opinions are relevant, right? I mean, just like any other issue, okay? I mean, you talk about politics, a vast majority of issues are not 80-20 issues, right? This is an 80-20 issue. This is just an overwhelming consensus that this is not fair, right? So yes, we do ignore the other 20%. They're just wrong.
Pretty much. I mean, it's an 80-20 issue.
Scott,
and
everybody's
and you just said it was a minuscule number.
It's
if
a
it's minuscule,
number.
Why do we have to upend?
We don't have to. The reason why
millions
I said it was a minuscule number, Scott, was because I don't think it's fair that you're scaring people at home thinking that boys are trying to compete in girls' sport by the droves and that this is going to take over, and you were scaring people at home. It's just not happening, Scott.
But this is like the most competitive track meet in the country.
Can I ask you?
Stop.
One
yeah. So you see, now you heard that. Again, these liberals, it's just amazing to me how they can't see the obvious compromise here, right? The obvious compromise is what we've already outlined, right? Just have trans athletes compete amongst themselves. It's really that simple. They're trying to pretend like this is so hard. It's such a complex issue. No, it's not a complex issue. It's a very straightforward issue. They just don't want compromise. They don't want compromise. The far left cannot accept compromise. They can't accept common sense solutions. And because people are afraid to piss off the far left, they're afraid to hurt feelings, they try to pretend as if this is more complicated than it really is. But hey, if they want to double and triple down on this and pretend as if this is so complicated, right? We don't know what to do, right? We need to study it more, right? If they want to do that, great. I just don't think it's going to work out well for them. I think Gavin Newsom, even though, again, this is clearly a political calculation, is a calculation being made because at least he's intelligent enough to know that this is not something that is going to appeal to a vast majority of the American people. And Democrats are going to struggle to win general elections if they continue to align with the far left on these types of issues. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.